Isn't today the anniversary of you and Dad's marriage? I've got a present for you. As she said this, the daughter presented a document. It was a divorce paper, with the husband's section already filled out. Sarah really is such a considerate and kind child, right? To think she prepared such a wonderful gift for our anniversary. You could have made an effort to look more put together, even at your age. There are plenty of women in their 50s who look young and beautiful. I don't need an old lady like you anymore. Dad says so, and I've never once thought of you as my mother in my whole 25 years. If you don't want to get sued for verbal abuse, you better pack up and leave fast. Both wearing hideous grins, they hurled abuse at me. Are you really sure about this? Things could get pretty rough, you know. I said this with emphasis, looking them straight in the eye, silently conveying the gravity of their choice. I am Jennifer, 55 years old, working for a major brokerage firm. I lived in a single-family home in New York, with my husband, for years my junior, and our 25-year-old daughter. I met my husband, Mike, when I was 23. After graduating from high school, Mike, who was a part-timer, worked at a convenience store near where I worked. I shopped there every day, so we naturally became acquainted. One day, I made a mistake at work and felt terribly down. Holding back tears, I somehow managed to get through my tasks and was about to leave the company to head home when I bumped into Mike by chance. Seeing my face, he seemed surprised at first but quickly approached me with a friendly smile. Hey, are you heading home? I just got off my shift too. How about grabbing a bite to eat? I know someone who works at a diner nearby. Taken aback by his sudden invitation, I froze. Then Mike, looking somewhat lonely, said, "Oh, did I bother you?" "I'm sorry." "No, it's not that." I was just surprised, not bothered at all. Relieved by my response, Mike smiled and took my hand, leading me toward the diner. I went along with him for a meal, somewhat passively, but that day marked the beginning of a close relationship, and after several dates, he asked me out. When my parents passed away unexpectedly, Mike supported me devotedly. Our relationship continued smoothly, and at 25, I married Mike. He had mentioned being estranged from his parents, so we had a quiet wedding at a chapel abroad. Though he was non-regular staff, Mike worked diligently and took over the household chores to help me, who was busy with work. When I was 30, I got pregnant with our daughter, Sarah, and Mike became a full-time homemaker, which allowed me to return to work soon after giving birth. We supported and cooperated with each other, living happily. I never doubted that these peaceful days would continue forever. When Sarah started kindergarten, I decided to entrust Mike with some financial responsibilities, giving him a family credit card for necessary expenses. I kept a close eye on the card statements, and Mike never made frivolous purchases, managing our home life well. I fondly recall seeing entries for indoor play areas for kids and children's clothing brands when Sarah was a baby. However, as she began elementary school, the situation started to look ominous. Around that time, my workload increased, and I began neglecting to check the card statements. This turned out to be a mistake. One day, casually checking the bank account, I couldn't believe the amounts being withdrawn. The recorded figures were more than triple what I had anticipated, and looking back over 6 months, the expenses had gradually increased since Sarah's school entry. Luxury clothing and watches, star-rated restaurant lunches, and high-end hotel stays had all accumulated, resulting in a hefty sum. I believe being a full-time homemaker is a respectable job, and I understand that Mike might want to indulge occasionally. I hated the idea of arguing over money. Yet, when the amounts became this significant, I could no longer stay silent. That night, I brought up the topic of the household expenses with Mike. To my surprise, his calm demeanor instantly turned hostile, and he began to shout. "So, a full-time homemaker like me isn't allowed a little luxury now and then? You can focus on your job because I take care of everything at home. I've always appreciated what you do, Mike. That's why I don't mind occasional treats. But there has to be a limit. Do you have any idea how much you spent last month?" When I asked him, my husband raised his voice in a fit of anger. "Cut it out. Always dumping the house chores on me, and then you have the nerve to nag about everything. This was the first time my husband had ever talked back to me like this. I got caught up in the heat of the moment and confronted him. Think about it. The amount of money spent doesn't make sense. There's no need to buy high-end clothes every month. And the cost for lunch is too much for one person. Who are you treating? I have my own social obligations, okay? Who I have lunch with and where is none of your business, right? You're one to talk, going out drinking under the pretense of socializing. The reason I come home late from drinking is because of work-related socializing. It's not something I do because I want to. If I could, I would rather come home early to spend time with my family. Hearing my husband speak like that deeply saddened me. Social drinking after work is stressful and exhausting. I'd rather spend time with my family and, if I'm going to drink, I'd prefer to do it with you, Mike. I conveyed my feelings, but my husband just glared at me with a sullen look. After that, I didn't want to argue with him anymore, so I stopped nagging him about money. Still, I made sure to check the credit card statements regularly. His spending was getting worse. Not just fancy restaurant lunches, but it looked like he was also buying expensive jewelry for someone. I wanted to confront him immediately, but recalling our last exchange, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Then one day when I got home, our third grader, Sarah, came running up to me. Mom, my indoor shoes are too small, I need new ones. I've been asking Dad since last month, but he says you won't let me. She held out her worn shoes to me, the heels crushed down. I had asked my husband to replace school supplies and outgrown clothes before. However, it seems he neglected to do so and blamed it on me. I asked him again to please take care of our daughter's needs. From that day on, I noticed a change in the way Sarah looked at me. Apparently, my husband had made it seem as though nothing could be bought without my permission, casting me in the light of a controlling wife. By the time I realized it, it was too late. As Sarah grew up, she began to crave designer wallets and the latest smartphones. She would beg her father, and when he hesitated, she would come to me. When I advised her to adopt a more reasonable attitude towards money, she called me a stingy old hag and began to show open hostility. My husband sided with Sarah, mocking me in their alliance. Whenever I spoke to him about the credit card bills, Sarah would come in and say, "Stop being mean to Dad. If you made more money, we wouldn't have this problem. Why did Dad ever marry a stingy old hag like you? You should be more grateful for what Dad does for us. Without him, you'd probably be alone, living a sad, lonely life." By the time Sarah reached high school, she had become as willful and reckless with money as her father. Feeling like I also had to do something, I kept earnestly talking to my daughter, but no matter how hard I tried, it was undone by my husband who, being a stay-at-home dad, spent more time with her than I did. Yet, we somehow managed to get by because he did his part with the household chores properly. However, once my daughter started working part-time after graduating high school, my husband blatantly began to slack off on the housework. He seemed to be out often, and the house was empty when I returned from work. No cleaning or laundry had been done, and there was no meal prepared. Confronting my husband would surely just lead to a fight. My daughter was on his side, and there was no longer a place for me in this house. Then, one day, something definitive happened. It was our 30th wedding anniversary. When I came home from work, there stood my husband and daughter, grinning at me in the entryway. "What's going on?" As I spoke up, Sarah looked at me with a spiteful smile and said, "Isn't it your wedding anniversary today? I have a present for you." While saying that, she handed me a document. It was a divorce paper with Mike's section already filled out. Sarah's such a considerate and kind girl. To prepare such a wonderful gift for our anniversary. If only you'd made an effort to dress up a bit, even at your age. There are plenty of women in their 50s who still look young and beautiful. "We don't need an old lady like you anymore," said Mike. "And since Dad says so, you know, I've never once thought of you as my mom in my 25 years. If you don't want to be sued for emotional abuse, you'd better get out fast," Sarah added. The two of them were throwing ugly sneers my way, spewing insults. "Are you really sure about this? You're gonna regret it," I said, staring them down. Still, they kept grinning at me condescendingly. With a sigh, I took the divorce papers and said, "All right. Let's get divorced." Mike's face relaxed with genuine happiness. "Well then, since you're the breadwinner, we'll be taking the house. Sarah wants to live here with me, right? That's fine, isn't it?" "Sure, I don't mind. Take the furniture and appliances too, do whatever you want with them," I replied calmly. Then Mike started talking about dividing assets. "And about the division of property, you should give me half of your savings too. After all, you were able to focus on your work because of me," he said with pride. I responded in a tone of disbelief. "Oh, you think I don't know anything? You've been smitten with another woman using my card. Let's see, about $200,000 over 15 years. I could sue for the misused funds and alimony, you know. If you don't want this to get messy, you'd better back off quietly." Mike had been having an affair with a woman he met through a dating app since Sarah was in elementary school. It seems Sarah knew and approved of it, as the documents from the detective agency included photos of Mike, his mistress, and Sarah all enjoying a vacation together. Seeing the color drain from Mike's face was something else. And Sarah's eyes were darting all over. They never dreamed I knew about the affair. "Sarah, I'm disowning you as my child. Since you don't need a miserly old lady like me, it's fine, right?" Ignoring their stunned faces, I packed my bags, took the divorce papers, and left the house. I spent the night at a hotel and submitted the divorce papers to the office the next day. Our divorce was finalized. Then, I rented a reasonably priced apartment near my work and began living alone. But a year later, Sarah started calling me non-stop. I had cut ties and was ignoring her, but eventually, exasperated by the persistent calls, I decided to answer. When I picked up the phone, Sarah was shrieking so loudly it was breaking up. "What's this about demanding alimony now? You've ruined my life." When I divorced Mike, I deliberately didn't ask for alimony for a reason. Just before the divorce, I met with his mistress. When I told her I was Mike's wife, she turned pale and started apologizing. "I'm sorry. I had no idea he was married. Lying won't help you now. It seems you've been quite involved with my daughter as well." As I casually pressed the play button on the tape recorder, a conversation of them cheerfully gossiping about me started to play. "I'm so sorry. I truly am. No need for apologies. With all this evidence, I'll be demanding a suitable amount for damages." I spoke with firm resolve, and she hung her head, her face ashen. I knew she was struggling with money. And that she had been seeing Mike, who was generous with his spending, because of that. Then, to her, who looked utterly drained, I suggested in a kind tone. "You truly loved my husband, didn't you? And yet, asking for a substantial amount in damages doesn't sit right with me." Her expression brightened up instantly. "Yes, that's right. I really love Mike. That's what I thought. Then, in light of your feelings, I won't press for the damages. Please, take responsibility and care for my husband to the end. If you ever abandon him, I'll come after you for the damages, all right?" I told her if she didn't want to pay a hefty sum, she'd have to stick with Mike till the end. At that moment, she probably didn't take it too seriously. But not long after, our divorce was finalized. For her, Mike was just a convenient source of luxury, courtesy of my money. When the divorce was settled, Mike joyfully told her. She panicked and pleaded for a reduction in the damages, but I refused. "You said you truly loved him, didn't you? If that was a lie, you must face the consequences. I won't be satisfied otherwise." When I conveyed this, she had no choice but to marry Mike. Sarah welcomed her as well, and maybe things were fine at the start. But it seems she couldn't stand it for long. Mike's lavish lifestyle was possible because of my earnings. After I was gone, they couldn't reduce their standard of living, splurging money like it was water. She worked tirelessly day and night trying to support their lifestyle, but Sarah seemed to scorn her, comparing her to me and hurling awful insults. Moreover, that house still had about 5 years left on the mortgage. That payment weighed heavily on them, and eventually, she couldn't take it anymore and left a completed divorce form before disappearing. Learning she had run away, I sent a certified letter to my ex-husband. Burdened not only with everyday expenses and the mortgage, but also the damages, Mike was at his wits' end. Hearing Sarah lash out in semi-hysteria, I couldn't help but snicker. It's because of what your dad did that we're in this situation with the damages. You're struggling now because you've lived beyond your means. If you're going to blame someone, don't blame me, blame your father for not teaching you how to manage money properly. I told her calmly and then ignored the still ranting Sarah, hanging up the phone. And that very day, I went to the store and changed my smartphone along with the number. After that, I left everything to my lawyer, who successfully secured the damages for me. According to the lawyer, Mike was initially very resistant. She and I met after I divorced that woman. It's outrageous to call it an affair. Plus, I've been the victim of her emotional abuse for years. She's a horrible woman. He complained to the lawyer. But, I had been recording all the verbal abuse and had submitted evidence collected from the private detective, as well as the credit card statements, which made it clear who was at fault. When the lawyer informed them that we had ample evidence, they seemed to realize that dragging out the discussion would be disadvantageous and agreed to make payments, albeit reluctantly. Moreover, that house went into foreclosure because the mortgage payments couldn't be met. Sarah grew tired of her father and seems to have found a live-in job and moved out. After hearing my final words, perhaps she took a hard look at herself because she left a letter addressed to me with the lawyer. In it, she wrote that she was hired as a live-in maid at a certain inn and included words of apology to me. Even so, I haven't just let bygones be bygones, but in my heart, I sent my daughter some silent support. Mike ended up filing for bankruptcy. Abandoned by his family and with nowhere to live, for a while, he was seen wrapped in cardboard, sleeping in parks and on riverbanks. Even in such straits, it seems he couldn't correct his reckless spending habits. He apparently got involved with loan sharks and is now missing. It's no longer any of my business. On my end, I've been living a peaceful life while continuing with my job. Recently, I welcomed a new kitten into the family. It's a little charmer with folded ears. Always comes snuggling up to me with a sweet look on its face. Today, when I sat on the couch, it climbed onto my lap and purred away. It was so endearing that it brought a smile to my face. I think to myself that I have to stay healthy for at least another 30 years for this little one. That's how I spend my peaceful days.